What's going on, guys? Vulkan here, and today we're introducing our first Diablo 2 Resurrected content to the channel. So to give a little context as to what I'm doing with this video series. So when Diablo 2 launched back in 2000, I was pretty young, right? I was at that point in time 10 years old. I didn't spend too much time on the game. I had other things going on. I lived on a farm, so there was a lot of, outdoor while the sun is up, you're outside doing things type of lifestyle. But over the years, I had revisited the game because I wanted to see what Diablo 2 was all about. And being able to experience it through a, let's say, like mature set of eyes versus a 10-year-old set of eyes was a lot different. So I didn't get a chance to do ladders or anything like that when Diablo 2 first launched. So now that Diablo 2 Resurrected is a thing, I decided to jump into this first ladder season and decided, guys, let's just have a good time. Basically, it was an excuse to start a new character, experiment with some new builds or classes that I've typically avoided in the past. So this is a new foray into Diablo 2 for me. And if you're like me and you never really spent too much time in the game, this is a video series for you. I'm documenting my journey through the beginning of this ladder season, kind of providing my build, how it performs, my key takeaways, and updating any changes that I decide to make. Now, if you want to follow along and build your character like me, absolutely go for it. If you think I can do something better, please let me know in the comments below. My goal with this build isn't to be an absolute just meta monster, but more or less just be something fun and different than what I'm used to playing. So, okay, that was way too long of an intro, but I did want to give a little bit of context because going into this, you're probably gonna be like, Vulkan, what are you doing, man? So just know this is kind of my first foray into this. So it's been a really cool time, but I did feel like it was important to kind of set some expectations for the video. Anyway, let's go ahead and let's jump into the build. So to start, I wanted to play something completely out of the ordinary. I usually play like a caster or some form of like self-cast AoE build, which ended up with me playing a Sorc or a Druid a lot. So for a change of pace, I decided to pick up the Assassin. Now towards the beginning, I went all in on Fire Blast. It has this kind of playstyle similar to like flask tossing, and it was really fun. I liked the range, the damage was great early on, and really just everything kind of fell over compared to some of the other builds that I experimented with other classes. And then once I hit level 12, it was all about Wake of Fire. This is a turret that sends out 5 waves of fire towards enemies, and it was an immediate upgrade from Fire Blast, from really kind of my overall experience and how quickly things just seemed to die. This thing just wiped out everything it touched at that level, and it was great. I decided to pick up Shockweb as well, just in case I ran into something that had an immunity to fire, which I did. I ran into an enemy that was completely immune to fire, so I'm really glad I ended up with Shockwave. And by the time I reached level 20, I had a pretty well-established set of skills that I was investing in. So in terms of my skill point allocations, I had 11 points into Fire Blast, 1 point into Shockweb, 1 point into Charged Bolt Sentry, and then 8 points into Fire Wake. Now, if I were to do it all over again, I would completely drop Sentry. It just doesn't seem to work very well right now, especially at this level, and if you haven't put a lot of investment into it. Instead, I would swap more points into Wake of Fire, but honestly, for now, this is more than sufficient, and it's getting the job done. So in terms of my stat points, I placed most of those into Vitality for some extra survivability, but I did have a stint where I put points into Dexterity and Strength. That way I can make sure I kept up with gear requirements, because as you all know, this is a moving goalpost, so you want to make sure to keep up with it, else you're going to be so far behind you can't equip anything that drops. It is definitely a balance to hang on to. Now to get this set up, what I did was I put all my points into Vitality until I hit level 18. And then I put 2 levels worth of points into Strength and Dexterity, and I'll likely put the next 5 or 6 levels worth of points into Vitality, so from 20 to 25 or 26, and then I'll make another investment into Strength and Dexterity to keep up with those requirements like I did last time. And that seems to be a pretty good process and a pretty good system where, every 5 or 6 levels, toss some points into Strength and Dex, that way you can keep up with whatever drops, and you don't want to get left behind like I mentioned earlier. Okay, so let's talk gear and some rune words that I picked up early on. So gear so far has been pretty flexible. I'm only level 20, obviously, but there are still some things that you can pick up early on to make life much easier. So at this point, I'm not really being too picky with my gear, but I am looking for a few key things. So I almost created this little like priority matrix to help, quickly establish what I need. So increases to fire damage or my overall damage, enhanced defense, resists, mana leech, movement speed increases, and then lastly, stat priority. So things like dexterity or strength will help immensely with those requirements. If I get some extra like vitality or something like that, that's great too. But for the most part, I want those increases to damage and then defense and then resists. That way I can survive long enough to let Fire Wake do its damage. So like I said, for weapons, I'm looking for increases to fire damage, enhanced damage, really just any upgrade here. This early on, it doesn't really matter. You don't really have like a whole build you can establish. So you're still kind of putting things together. So early on, I could have picked up the Leaf rune word if I wanted, which is the staff. This is going to increase my fire damage as well as give me a couple extra points in my fire skills. But up until this point, I opted to stick with a rare weapon and shield for some extra beefiness. And honestly, I think at this point, the weapon I have, the Soul Needle, has been working super well. And like I said, anything with Mana Leech is great. That helps a ton to avoid pot slamming, because when you use Fire Wake, it's going to take a lot of mana. So you want to make sure you're not sitting there just smashing mana pots in order to stay on top of things. Getting a couple hits in with your basic attack, refunding some of your mana, that way you can use that Fire Wake skill, is going to be really, really helpful. Now gloves, these are some basic magic ones with enhanced defense and stat boost, nothing crazy. I'd like to keep improving on these, maybe with a rare item, but for now this is fine because again, it has that enhanced defense that I was looking for. Rings for the most part have been resists and stat boosts. That way it gives me a little bit of extra survivability and it gives some buffer for the item requirements. The belt in this video is pretty mediocre. It gives an extra 8 pot slots, which is always nice, but the actual affixes are extremely forgettable. Enhanced defense, which is great, lightning resist, which is not overly useful right now, and then durability repair. So I'm really hoping to replace this sooner than later with something that's a little bit more geared towards my build and my playstyle. Now for boots, these are a pair of magic heavy boots of balance. They give some nice hit recovery and restore stamina, so they do help me stay and run for a longer period of time. Overall, they're okay, but again, I want to replace these as I go. Now the shield I'm using is Grim Rock, and this has really nice resists across all the different categories. It has a big increase to block and block chance, and it also has a Thorns affix as well. So overall, this one really was too solid to pass up early on, so I decided to throw it on with that Soul Needle I was talking about. My amulet is a simple plus 19 to life. And then for my body armor, so I did create the rune word Stealth for the increased movement speed, cast speed, mana regen, resist, and magic damage reduction. Overall, I mean, this one is pretty much a no-brainer early on. It just gives so much utility and protection that you're kind of crazy to pass this one up. It's extremely easy to farm. You can just hammer out the Countess a few times. You're gonna get all the runes you need. You can talk to the gear vendor early on at the rogue encampment, get a 2-socket, get the runes you need, throw it in there, and suddenly you're off to the races. So again, this is one that I would highly recommend, especially if you're just starting out. Grab this and you're gonna have a solid chess piece to get you through most of the game. Now as for the helm, I do have a rare one for now. I also created the Raw runes word for a big fire resist as I get deeper into the game where I need that. But for now, the rare one I have gives enhanced defense, increases to life and resist. And honestly, it's just more coverage than any other I have right now. So again, I'm just kind of hanging on to the other one. That way when I need it, I have it. But for now, this is solid. So as you guys can see, I mean, it's definitely a patchwork setup right now when it comes to gear. I have some items that have really helped the build quite a bit. I went out and grabbed that critical rune word with stealth, and then I prepped for the future with the raw helm. So right now I'm just working through getting through the end of the game, and then I want to transition to Nightmare, and then I can really start fleshing this build out and finding items that are going to propel me much, much, much further than we have right now. Now, the last thing I want to touch on are the charms that I have. So right now it's mostly defensive. Things like increases to life and defense. I have one charm that gives me an increase to strength and attack rating. So again, nothing too set in stone right now, but all nice additions that I have going on. So let's talk about strengths and weaknesses so far with the build that I'm noticing as I'm going through and playing this. So the Fire Wake build for the Assassin has been unstoppable for the most part up until this point. But there are some sequences that are really crippling this build. So Maggot Layer, and Arcane Sanctuary. Basically anything with a narrow corridor or up and down stairs. This really slims down the Firewake skill to a very small area of effect, and it makes for some really awful situations where basically you're just burning through mana and you're not able to kill anything because they're not standing in that very small section of damage. There were a few times where I died because I had dropped my Firewake and it just didn't kill anything, and I was out of mana and I couldn't do anything to save myself. So this is why you need to supplement with Fire Blast in your toolkit. This skill allows you to target specific areas, nuke groups of enemies for yourself, and then you can use this for any narrow sections and staircases in the game, and it's going to make your life a little bit easier because, like I said, Firewake just really struggles with those. Now, another thing, so Firewake is not overly great at single target damage. So you want to make sure to use Fire Blast basically to take care of any act bosses. So you can drop a Firewake if you want to, but for the most part, I just spam Fire Blast, stay out of their attacks and all that fun stuff, and typical boss rules, right? And then kind of whittle them down going that direction. Now, another glaring weakness is when you drop the Firewake skill and enemies are right on top of you, because there's a very small minimum range that comes with this skill. So basically you have a dead zone right in front of the turret. So if you're too close to enemies, they're going to essentially dodge all these attacks, and it's going to cause a lot of headaches for you. So again, this is where that Fire Blast skill comes into play, or just kiting into Firewake's range. Either one of those will work great. You just need to be aware of your ranges and you should be okay. Now, the last weakness is definitely the ramp up time with Firewake. So right now, the turret takes a second to start unloading its arsenal, and because of this, enemies can move quickly out of range or run towards you and into the dead zone in front of your turret. So again, you just need to kind of be aware and back up a little bit from your turret to make sure all of the attacks hit your target. Otherwise, they're going to sit in the dead zone, or even like the Shanks, the enemy type will jump out of the way, and it just takes forever to whittle them down. So one of the best tips I can give you is to toss your turret to the right or left of you. That way the turret can attack the flank of your target and avoid that dead zone entirely. And don't think that this build is a one turret at a time build. You can throw up to 5 turrets out at once, and they're going to just unleash an absolute inferno on everything that's near them. So being able to kind of understand that, position your turrets wisely, you're going to be just fine. Now, some of the big strengths of this build come from just how versatile and effective the Firewake can be at clearing. 'Cause, like, guys, let me tell you, like, this skill has unreal damage. I mean, unreal. If you're in open areas, you're in wider corridors, this skill will clear enemies incredibly fast. You don't really have to worry too much about things like swarming you or even getting close to you because they die so quickly. Now, because of the flying V design of the skill's attack, it allows for slightly more time for enemies to walk into the danger zone than if it was just a straight firewall. So as this thing's going out, you're having enemies kind of pour out of, like, let's say, like different doorways, or they're coming down a hallway. You know, being able to give them a little bit of extra time to walk into the attack is going to be super helpful. And I've seen this work out better than not. Now, you're going to get this skill super early, and it doesn't really cost much in terms of gear, and it's incredibly powerful from the get-go. So you really don't need any prerequisites or anything to set up to make this thing work. It's just truly a plug-and-play build, and one that you can just dive in and start playing with, which is great. So guys, keep in mind as we go through this whole video is level 1 to 20. I plan on doing another one to update everyone at level 40, maybe 30 or 40, and then throughout Nightmare as I pick up more gear and tune this thing up. So I don't plan to have like a huge long, 10 video series, but more or less like, hey, here's a couple as I level up, and then here's a couple as I'm fine tuning, and then here's where the final build landed. So maybe like 4 or 5. So overall, guys, this has been a super fun build. It's been really good to kind of get back into a well-polished ARPG again, something where I can really kind of invest my time into, and getting to play ladder for the first time. Not ever getting to experience that on the original game was something that I kind of felt like I missed out on. It's something that, a lot of like my friends or people that I've met, online in the gaming communities talked about was, oh man, Diablo 2 ladders were a blast, and they were still popular up until Resurrected came out. People were still playing these things, and so it was just one of those games where I felt like I didn't fully experience everything that it brought to the table. I played through it, and I was like, that was fun. Then I moved on to something else. But being able to get a chance to actually jump into Resurrected play through, do a brand new build, jump into ladder, kind of chase down some of those new things that they threw in there. It has been fun. It's been a blast. So I hope to bring some more of this stuff to the channel, but hey, you know what? We'll see what happens. Anyway, so thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it, more than you guys know. It's been a pretty interesting past few months when it comes to YouTube. So I appreciate everyone who's there and supporting and all of that fun stuff. And if you're somebody new and this is your first video you've seen from me, if you like action RPGs, consider subscribing, liking, sharing the video. If you do want to support the channel beyond subscribing, you can check out the join button below for some special bonuses. But overall, guys, thank you just with all my heart. I really appreciate it. This has been Vulkan, and I'll talk to you guys next time.
Sound off, one and all, everybody.